Hello everyone, welcome back. The video I'm going to be discussing all day one signings for each and every Western Conference team. We'll get to all of that coming up right now. Hello and welcome to another video here at the Internet Hockey Channel. Now, as I discussed in my previous video, I'm going to be doing a couple of videos here talking about the Western and Eastern Conference and how each team made out during day one. So I'm going to talk about each and every team's signings and who they brought in starting on day one. So we're going to start with the Pacific Division here. We're going to start with the Anaheim Ducks. So day one, they made 3 signings in free agency. They brought in Trevor Carrick, Alex Killorn, and Radko Gudas. Now, I talked about Gudas on my live stream. Signed a 3-year, $4 million deal. Was playing really well with the Panthers last year. Was a big, tough defenseman. Really good player playing with the Panthers on the third pair. So he was a really good addition for the Anaheim Ducks. He's going to be able to help on either the second or third pair, in my opinion. Ducks do have a weaker defense, so I do think he can help in the variety of different situations, and I think Gudas is a really good addition for the Anaheim Ducks. Alex Killorn, who was number 3 on my trade bait board, and signed after off my live stream. Solid top 6 forward. He's going to be in a fantastic fit with the Ducks. He's going to be able to play really good minutes with like Zebra, Terry, and really help those guys. He signs a 4-year, $6.25 million deal. So a really good deal for Killorn. He's going to help in their top 6. He's a winger. He can play either side. So I think it's a really good move for the Anaheim Ducks to try and bolster their forward group. And then they also signed depth defenseman Trevor Carrick to a 1-year league minimum deal. Carrick's a decent depth defenseman. Maybe could get called up at some point in the NHL season, but it's most likely going to be a depth addition. So some 3 key guys. Gudas is going to be their second or third pair of defensemen in Anaheim. You got Killorn, who's going to be a solid top 6 option for the next couple of years, and then you've also got depth defenseman Carrick. So pretty good signings. First day of signing there for the Anaheim Ducks. Going over to the Calgary Flames, they made no signings on day 1 of the free agent frenzy. So lots of teams were busy. The Flames were one of the few teams who were not busy and did not do anything. So no signings for the Flames. Next we go over to the Edmonton Oilers. They made 4 signings, so pretty good. The first one's simple. They signed Noel Hoffenheimer to a 1-year entry-level contract that's an AAV of $845,000. Hoffenheimer's a defenseman. Maybe eventually could be a third-pair defenseman, but for the time being, will most likely just be a minor player just trying to improve his game. But the other ones were all significant signings. 2 depth forwards. They signed Drake Caggiula to a 2-year league minimum deal, and they signed Lane Peterson to a 2-year league minimum deal. So a couple of really good moves there. Peterson, Caggiula both have prior NHL experience. Peterson's been playing in the NHL over the past couple of years. Caggiula has a ton of games of NHL experience over the past, and both can be easily good bomb 6 forwards. And with the Oilers losing guys like Yamamoto and Costin and Bukestad this year, I think those 2 could easily fit into like 4th line roles for that team. So a couple of really good 4th line forwards. And then they also brought in Connor Brown. Brown was number 6 on my trade bait board. As I discussed in my trade video, he's a really good signing. The entire deal is a $4 million deal for 1 year, but his cap hit is only league minimum at $775,000. There's about $3.2 million in signing bonuses, so it's a really good deal for Edmonton. I'll only count for league minimum against his salary book. I think for Brown, that's a really good deal. He's only 1 year, so if things don't work out or something, he can go to free agency and get a lot more money next year, given the fact that cap will go up. So that's a really good deal. Brown's played with McDavid before, and I think playing on maybe the top unit with McDavid would be good. He could also be a solid middle 6 forward and sort of replace Yamamoto. So in my opinion, that's a really good addition for the Oilers. So getting Brown, who's a good middle 6 forward, Peterson and Caggiula, who are good 4th line forwards, and they also got Hoffenheimer, who's a good entry-level contract player. So good signings there all around for the Oilers. Next with the LA Kings, they made a ton of signings day 1. 2 defensemen, both depth ones. They sent Steven Stantini, who was with the Blues last year, to a 1-year $800,000 deal. And they signed Andreas Englund, who was with the Avs and the Hawks last year, to a 1-year $1 million deal. So some pretty good signings there. They brought back Jared Anderson-Dolan on a 1-year league minimum deal. They got in Mikhail Maltsev, who was with the Avs last year, to a 1-year league minimum deal. They brought in Trevor Lewis, who was with the Flames last year and has been with the Kings on a 1-year league minimum deal. And then they also brought in Cam Talbot on a 1-year $1 million deal. And they brought in David Riddick on a 1-year $875,000 deal. So they don't have much cap space, so they weren't handing out a lot of money to players. but these are some good depth signings. England, solid player, can be a 6th, 7th defenseman, as he showed this past year on the Avs and the Hawks. So with the Kings trading away a couple of pieces of the depth with guys like Walker and Jersey, I think England could step into the NHL role next year. As for Santini, he's a decent depth defenseman. He could still be one of their first call-ups, in my opinion, but he's most likely, in my opinion, going to be an AHL player. Talbot is going to be their new starter. They lost Korpisalo in free agency, so they needed someone to replace him. They don't have much money, so Talbot's going to be their 1A for this year. They signed Riddick to challenge with Copley. I think one of Riddick or Copley are going to be the backup. We'll find out probably in training camp. Meanwhile, the other one's most likely going to be the third stringer in the AHL. So, going interesting to see, but they brought in some good competition with Copley for the backup role in LA. And then they signed 3 depth players. Lewis could be a solid 4th liner for them. He's played in LA before. He was with the Calgary Flames the past couple of years. He's more of a 12th, 13th forward, so I'm not sure if he would be able to play in every single game, but he should be a good depth forward for the Kings. Anderson Dolan, same sort of thing. He's a solid 4th line forward, a lot younger than Lewis is, but he's probably going to be like a 12th, 13th forward with the Kings, so that's a really good signing. Malta's most likely an AHL forward, but could be a good call-up option. So some pretty good signings there for the Kings to improve their depth on the forward group, improve their depth on defense, and help the goaltending situation. Next with the San Jose Sharks, they signed a couple of decent players too. So they signed one defenseman, that's Kyle Burrows, who was with Vancouver last year, signing him to a 3-year, $1.1 million AAV deal. They signed Mackenzie Blackwood to a 2-year deal with an AAV of $2.35 million after not qualifying him. And then they brought in Giovanni Smith on a 2-year, $800,000 AAV. They re-signed Fabian Zetterlund on a 2-year, $1.45 million AAV. They brought in Ryan Carpenter on a 1-year league minimum deal, and they brought in Scott Sabrin on a 2-year league minimum deal. So these are pretty good signings. Burrows showed last year in Vancouver he can be a solid 6th, 7th defenseman. I could see him be a consistent 3rd pair defenseman on the Sharks, with them being a little bit weaker on the defensive end, especially if they trade out Erik Karlsson. So I definitely do think that that's a really good addition there for the Sharks. And Burrows, you've got a couple of forwards, Carpenter, Smith. I think both of those additions are really good. They should both be solid 4th line forwards next year for the Sharks. Carpenter was with the Rangers, spent time in the minors. Smith spent time in the minors. Both also spent time on the 4th line. So I think both on a weaker Sharks team could be a solid 4th line options. Fabian Zetterlund, really good player. The Sharks are going to bring him back on a 2-year deal. He should still be a consistent top 9 forward. Scott Sabrin, most likely going to be an AHL player, but could be a call-up option if there's some injuries. And then Mackenzie Blackwood would most likely be the 1B in San Jose behind Kaapo Kähkönen. So good signing to get the backup role dealt with in San Jose. They also get a couple of good depth forwards. They re-signed one of their key RFAs, and they're able to get some more depth on the forward group, as well as getting a solid 3rd pair defenseman. So some pretty good moves there for the Sharks when they won. As for the Kraken, they did make an overabundance of moves, but they did make 4 solid ones. They brought in John Hayden on the forward group on a 1-year league minimum deal. They brought in Marian Stanic, who was with the Dallas Stars last year, on a 1-year league minimum deal. They brought in Jimmy Sheldon on a 1-year league minimum deal, and then they sent Brian Dumoulin to a 2-year deal with an AAV of $3.15 million. So for Hayden, depth forward, most likely will be in the AHL, but can easily be one of their first call-ups. Stanic, same thing, AHL forward, but will most likely be one of their first call-ups if they run into injury troubles. Sheldon's most likely going to be an AHL forward. Could be called up if there's injuries. Dumoulin's going to be a really good top 6 defenseman. Now, they lost Carson Soucy to Vancouver, as we know, earlier in the day, so Dumoulin really replaces him. But I could see him be a solid top 4 defenseman, maybe playing with a guy like Will Borgen or something. So I think those are some really good signings for the Kraken. They improved their defense a little bit, and then you get some depth at the defensive and offensive position. So some pretty good signings they won for the Kraken. Next is the Canucks. They signed a lot of guys. I'll get to the ELC first. They signed for Tristan Nielsen to a 2-year, $870,000 AAV ELC. So the center looks like he could eventually be a good bottom 6 center, maybe a 3rd or 4th liner. So I think that's a really good move for the Canucks to get into his ELC. And then they improved a lot of other places. They signed goalie Zach Sachenko, who's a good 3rd, 4th stringer in the system, to a 1-year league minimum deal. They signed forward Teddy Bluger to a 1-year, $1.9 million deal. They signed Carson Soucy to a 3-year deal with the AAV of $3.25 million. They signed Ian Cole to a 1-year, $3 million deal. And they signed Matt Irwin to a 1-year league minimum deal. So for Nielsen, he'll most likely continue to play in the AHL for the Canucks. Sawchenko, they still have a couple of good goalies there, such as Solov. So I think Sawchenko will either be a third or fourth string, depending on who's the backup for the Canucks. So I think that's a really good depth addition for someone who can be a really good depth player for the Canucks. Teddy Bluger, brought in. He should be able to be a good solid bottom six forward. It would not surprise me at all if Bluger took the third line center role in Vancouver. I think that's a possibility. So I think that's a really good move there for the Canucks. And then after moving on from Oliver Ekman-Larsson, not qualifying Barry Dermott, they improved their defense. Irwin's a good 6th, 7th defenseman. On a league minimum deal, he should be a solid defender if he gets into any games. Soucy and Cole should definitely improve that team. Cole's a good third pair defenseman. 1 year, $3 million. It's a perfect deal. Playing with maybe a younger sort of defenseman, he could definitely be a solid third pair player for the Canucks. As for Soucy, he should fit in really well in the top 4, and he should really basically replace Oliver Ekman-Larsson in the lineup. So really good signings there for the Canucks, getting all these players into their lineup. And finally, to finish off the Pacific Division, we had the Vegas Golden Knights. And for the Golden Knights, they didn't really do much, just a few depth signings. They signed a forward/defenseman Mason Gertson to a 2-year league minimum deal. They signed forward Gage Quinney to a 2-year league minimum deal. And they also signed forward Mason Morelli to a 2-year league minimum deal. So not really overly abundance. All three of these players are most likely going to be in the AHL. And if there's injuries, they could possibly be called up. Probably Quinney would be the first, in my opinion, then Gertson, and then Morelli. So just some depth forward additions to the Stanley Cup champion Golden Knights on day 1. So pretty good moves there for all these teams. And then we go over to the Central Division now and see what these Central Division teams did. So for the Arizona Coyotes, they did a fantastic job day 1. So they improved their defense by adding Troy Stecher on a 1-year, $1.1 million deal. They got some depth in the goaltending position, adding Matt Villalta to a 1-year league minimum deal. And then they also improved their forward group a lot, signing Nick Bjugstad to a 2-year deal with the AAV of $2.1 million, Alex Kerfoot to a 2-year deal with the AAV of $3.5 million, Jason Zucker to a 1-year, $5.3 million deal, and then Travis Barron and Alex Galchenyuk to 1-year league minimum deals. So on the defensive end, we know that they're really weak on the defensive end. They could probably still use some defensive help, in my opinion, but Stetcher's a solid player. He played with them last year before being dealt to the Calgary Flames. On the right side, at $1.1 million, he's a solid defenseman. He could probably fit in their top 4 this year, and if they're not doing overly well leading out towards the trade line, they can move him. So that's a really good deal for them. As for Villalta, the Coyotes still have 3 key goalies ahead of him. So they have Prosper top, they have Vejmelka, they have Ingram. So I would expect him to probably be the 4th stringer in Arizona. But if there wasn't enough injuries, I could see him be called up to the NHL level. So that's a solid addition for the Coyotes. And on the forward group, Kerfoot and Zucker should be solid top 6 forwards for the Coyotes. Like we said, they don't have a strong forward group, so adding those 2 guys, Zucker's a really good playmaker. We saw him do it with Pittsburgh. Kerfoot can definitely put up some points. We saw him do it with Toronto, so those 2 I think could be really good pieces in Arizona with guys like Keller and Schmalz. On top of those 2, you also have Nick Bjugstad, who I think should be a solid maybe 3rd or 4th liner for the Coyotes again. Once again, he was a Coyote last year and was dealt the deadline to the Oilers, so good to see him get back with the Coyotes. Galchenyuk at this point in time is probably going to be like a 4th, maybe spare forward. I could see him definitely get into some NHL games, but most likely it will be a spare. Travis Barron most likely will be a AHL forward in my opinion, but I could see him getting called up as well. So some pretty solid signings here. Depth goalie in Villalta, a solid everyday NHL defenseman in Stetcher, and then some top 6 improvements with Kerfoot and Zucker, a top 9 improvement with Bjugstad, and then some more depth additions with Barron and Galchenyuk. So some really good moves there for the Coyotes. Next, going over to the Chicago Blackhawks, they made 1 loan signing on free agent day 1, and that is they have brought in Ryan Donato on a 2-year deal with AAV of $2 million. So after bringing in Perry, after bringing in Foligno, after bringing in Hall, they bring in another good forward. Donato should be a solid player. He can play left wing, he can play center, so he's a versatile forward. I could easily see him play in the middle 6, maybe on the 3rd line. So that's a really good deal, and I think after spending the past couple of years with Seattle, that's a really good contract for Donato. So solid signing there for the Chicago Blackhawks. Then over to the Colorado Avalanche. They signed a ton of players. On the forward group, they signed Riley Tuft, who was playing with the Stars last year, to a 1-year league minimum deal. They signed Andrew Cogliano to a 1-year deal with an $825,000 AAV. They signed Miles Wood to a 6-year deal with an AAV of $2.5 million. They signed Jonathan Drouin to a 1-year deal with an AAV of $825,000. And they signed Chris Wagner to a 1-year league minimum deal. On the defensive end, they signed Jack Khan to a 2-year league minimum deal. They signed Bowen Byram to a 2-year contract extension with an AAV of $3.85 million. And they signed Corey Schooneman to a 1-year league minimum deal, on top of signing goalie Arvid Holm to a 1-year league minimum deal as well. So, on the goaltending side, they still have Francois, they still have Georgiev, they have a good guy like An Union, who's in the minors as well, so Holm will probably be either the most likely 4th-string goalie, but once again, could be called up if there's enough injuries. On the defensive end, they lost a couple of their depth pieces, like England, like an Eric Johnson, so they needed some defensive help. The Byram extension is really good. They're able to get Byram extended for less than $4 million, and he can remain as their solid top 4 defenseman for the next couple of years. They also got Jack Khan, and Corey Schooneman, who should be AHL players, but I could see them be like a 7th defenseman in the Avs organization with their loss of depth. So that's a really good move from the Avalanche to bring in those guys. And then on the forward group, you have Riley Tuft, who will most likely be an AHL player, but I could see him maybe getting a chance on the 4th line. Andrew Cogliano, solid bottom 6 forward, has been with the Avalanche the past couple of years. He should still remain in the bottom 6 of the Avalanche. Miles Wood should definitely be a solid middle 6 player, possibly replacing a guy like Rodriguez or Confer in the lineup. Drouin, same sort of thing, decent middle 6 forward, should replace one of those two in the lineup. Wagner, most likely just like Tuft, probably will be an AHL forward, but could be a good bottom 6 forward if he gets an opportunity. So some really good signings there. Wagner and Tuft as depth additions. Wood and Drouin should definitely fill in middle 6 roles. Getting Cogliano back is a really good addition for them. Schooneman and counter depth players. Getting Byram extended is a huge deal for them, and then getting Holm is going to add some depth on the goaltending side for the Avalanche. So some pretty good signings there. Next with the Dallas Stars, they signed 4 players. They were able to bring in 3 key forwards. They re-signed Joel Hanley on the defensive end to a 2-year, $787,000 deal. So getting him back is good. He's a good depth defenseman. But on the forward group, they signed Sam Steele to a 1-year, $850,000 deal. Craig Smith to a 1-year, $1 million deal. And Matt Duchene to a 1-year, $3 million deal. So those are some pretty good signings. Steele showed last year he can still be a solid middle 6 forward in Minnesota. Smith, more of a bottom 6 forward at this point in time, but still can put up some points. Duchene was bought out of his contract by Nashville. Still a really good middle 6 forward, could probably play on like the 2nd line. So they get a 2nd line player in Duchene, a 3rd line player in Steele, and a 4th line player in Smith, and that really helps their depth, as they did lose a couple of guys like a Max Domi or a Luke Glendening or a Joel Kiviranta in free agency. So to get all 3 of these guys and prove that forward group is a really good win for the Dallas Stars. So I really do like what the Dallas Stars did there. You get another depth defenseman, Joel Hanley, who could definitely continue to help the Stars as he has the past couple of years. Going over to the Minnesota Wild now. They signed only 2 players on day 1 of free agent frenzy, not overly significant ones. They signed Vinny Lettieri to a 2-year league minimum deal and Jacob Lucchini to a 1-year league minimum deal. Both players are most likely going to be AHL forwards. I think Lettieri could easily be one of their first call-ups. Lucchini most likely would possibly be a call-up if there's enough injuries. So a couple of good depth players to improve their forward depth, in my opinion, for the Wilds, but nothing too significant. With the Nashville Predators, they did really good on day 1 of free agency. They brought in Luke Schenn on a 3-year deal with an AAV of $2.75 million. They brought back Alex Carrier on a 1-year deal. They'll have an AAV of $2.5 million. They brought in goalie Troy Grosnick on a 1-year deal, league minimum $775,000. They brought in Ryan O'Reilly on a 4-year deal with an AAV of $4.5 million. They also brought in Anthony Angelo on a 2-year league minimum deal. They brought in Gustav Nyquist on a 2-year deal with an AAV of $3.185. They also re-signed Cody Glass on a 2-year deal with a $2.5 million AAV. So pretty good signings. They still have Askarov. They still have Staros and Lankinen in the goaltending group. So I would not expect Grosnick to be a solid player. He'll probably be the 4th-string goalie in Nashville, and he'll be able to work out of there, but probably won't get into much NHL time this year. On the defensive end, bringing back Carey is really good. He had a really down year last year, but he showed his offensive potential a couple of years ago, and I think it'd still be a solid 2nd or 3rd pair defenseman. As for Luke Schenn, he improves that defensive depth for Predators. Shin's a solid top 4 right shot defenseman and a good veteran to work around some of their younger players. So those were some really good additions for the Nashville Predators. As for the other ones, they bring back Glass. He had a really good season last year, so he should continue to be a good second or third line center. Anthony Angelo, most likely will be an AHL forward, but I could see him be like a fourth line forward maybe at the NHL level, so maybe be a call-up option, so we'll see where he goes. O'Reilly, Nyquist, really good additions. O'Reilly, with all of the moves that they made, will probably at this point in time be the Nashville Predators' first line center. That's a really good addition. I think of 4 years to $4.5 million, that's a really good deal for O'Reilly, so that's a solid addition for the Predators. As for Nyquist, solid middle six forward, signing him to a 2-year deal I think is a really good deal. You could either play on the second or third line, so some really good additions here for the Preds, signing a top 6 center, a middle 6 winger, re-bringing back Glass, who's a solid middle 6 center, getting some depth in Angelo, getting a solid top 4 defenseman in Shen, getting a solid top 6 defenseman in Carrier, and then also getting Grosnick, who should definitely improve their goaltending position. So some pretty good deals there for the Nashville Predators. Going over to the St. Louis Blues now, they signed 4 players on the first day of free agent frenzy, and nothing was really overly significant. They signed goalie Malcolm Subban, 1-year league minimum deal. They signed Josh Jacobs, 1-year league minimum deal. They signed Wyatt Kalynuk, 1-year league minimum deal, and they signed Mackenzie McEachern back on a 2-year league minimum deal. So nothing overly significant there for the Blues. Subban will probably be the team's maybe third string goalie next year, especially if Hofer gets an NHL role. So some good depth there, especially if they run into some injuries. Subban has some NHL experience. Jacobs and Kalynuk should both be AHL defensemen. They both do really well. Kalynuk's most likely the more likely call-up. He does have some NHL experience. But both are most likely AHL forwards, so I would not be surprised at all if they spent most of next year in the AHL and they were not overly abundant NHL forwards. They could see him get called up. McEachern was in the Carolina Hurricanes organization last year after signing there. He has spent time with the Blues organization and could be a really solid bomb 6 forward in my opinion for the Blues. So some really good signings there. Depth on the forward group with McEachern, depth on the defensive end with Jacobs and Kalynuk, and depth on the goaltending side with Subban. And finally here with the Winnipeg Jets. They signed also 4 players on day 1 of free agent frenzy. They signed 2 goaltenders. They signed Colin Delia to a 1-year league minimum deal, and they signed Laurent Brossoit back on a 1-year, $1.75 million deal. And then they signed 2 forwards. They signed Jeffrey Viel to a 1-year league minimum deal, and they signed Vladislav Nemesnikov to a 2-year deal with an AAV of $2 million. So for Delia, he'll most likely be their third stringer. Definitely will be interesting to see how well he does, and if there's injuries, he can easily be called up. Brossoit will most likely be a backup. Still some things to determine on whether Hellebuyck will be dealt or not at this point in time, but for the time being, Brossoit will most likely back up Hellebuyck. For the next year, be a solid backup, maybe 1B goalie, so that's a really good addition for the Jets. Viel could definitely be a good bomb 6 forward. He showed that in San Jose. Could easily be a AHL player too, but I would think mostly he'll be a solid bomb 6 forward for the Jets. And then Nemesnikov should be a good middle 6 forward, just like he was after he was acquired at the deadline by the Winnipeg Jets. So that's a really good deal for the Jets to get a good middle 6 forward in Nemesnikov, to get a good depth forward in Viel, to get a good goalie in Brossoit, and to get a good goalie in Delia. So that's all the signings for the Western Conference on day 1. Love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. Which sign do you think was the best of these teams? Which team do you think made out best on day 1? Was it the Predators? Was it the Stars? Was it the Ducks? Was it the Kraken? Definitely love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. Which team made out the best on day 1 free agent frenzy on the Western Conference? Which contract was the best in your opinion? Which contract was the worst in your opinion? And which team do you think did the worst in your opinion? Love to hear your thoughts on all of the signings that were discussed in the Western Conference down in the comments. But that's all I'm going to talk about for here in this video. Stay tuned for another one talking about the Eastern Conference signings on day 1. That'll be posted soon, hopefully. But definitely love to hear your thoughts down in the comments, and don't forget to stay tuned for that. But that's what I'm going to talk about for today. Remember to like this video, and if you really liked it, remember to subscribe. I also do a blog talking about news, rumors, trades, stuff like that, so definitely check that out. I'll leave a link to that in the description below, and I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.